Next to the fentanyl crisis wreaking havoc in communities across the country, overdoses, drug seizures, and concerns continue to grow from coast to coast.
The victim can be seen buying the fentanyl and then walking over to the front door of the gas station before collapsing.
A snapshot of America's fentanyl crisis. An average of one person every 10 hours dies in this city of a fentanyl overdose.
A lot more people are dying, and it's in a lot of the drug supply, and people are doing it without knowing they're doing it.
Hello, my name is Ethan with Nathan, Kassidy, Diane, Robert, and Amelia. And in this podcast today, we're going to be discussing the fentanyl crisis that is currently plaguing our nation. We will take a deep dive into what exactly opioids are, facts on this potent type of drug, where they came from, what it does to the body, and what is being done about it. First, we have the history of opioids with Nate.
For this segment of the podcast, we will be discussing the history of opioids and fentanyl. So the history of opioids is extensive, dating back multiple centuries. Opiates derived from the opium poppy, which were initially used for pain relief and sedation in the 19th century. Morphine gained popularity as a potent anesthesia, revolutionizing pain management. However, alongside its benefits, the addictive nature of opioids became evident. In the late 20th century, we witnessed a surge in opioid prescription for chronic pain, contributing to the opioid epidemic, which we are discussing today. Opioid misuse and overdose deaths soared, prompting increased scrutiny and efforts to address the crisis. Fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, emerged as a potent player in this landscape. Originally developed for medical use, fentanyl's high potency led to its incorporation in pain management, especially for cancer patients. However, its illicit production and distribution escalated, and the opioid crisis also escalated. Fentanyl's potency poses a significant risk of overdose, as even a minute quantities can be lethal. The crisis prompted responses such as increased regulation, prescription monitoring programs, and the development of naloxone for opioid overdose reversal. Public health campaigns aimed to raise awareness about opioid risks. Addiction treatment programs expanded, and efforts focused on reducing opioid prescribing rates. Despite these measures, the complex interplay of medical, social, and economic factors continue to challenge effective opioid control. As society grapples with the opioid crisis, understanding the evolution of opioid use is crucial. The mid-20th century marked the synthesis of mepridine and methadone, expanding the opioid pharmaceuticals. These opioids were initially hailed for their potential as analgesics and substitutes for morphine. However, their misuse also contributed to the growing concerns around opioid addiction. Fentanyl, with its rapid onset and potency, entered medical practice as a valuable tool. However, its diversion to illicit markets and subsequent adulteration of other drugs amplified the dangers associated with opioid use. The opioid crisis spurred legislative responses such as prescription drug monitoring programs and opioid prescribing guidelines. Fentanyl's role in the opioid crisis underscores the need for comprehensive strategies addressing both medical and societal aspects. Ongoing research, education, and policy initiatives are essential to navigating the complexities of opioid use and mitigating its profound impact on individuals and communities.
Next, Diane will tell us where fentanyl comes from.
It is a challenge for the government to stop people from smuggling fentanyl due to the large drug production being done worldwide and being smuggled internationally. The Drugs and Alcohol Administration, or DEA, states that the majority of fentanyl production is happening outside of the U.S. borders and is being brought through smuggling from Mexico, China, and India.
Next, we have some facts on fentanyl with Kassidy.
Fentanyl, known on the streets as Goodfellas, Murder 8, Jackpot, Dance Fever, and Apache, to name a few, are now the most common drugs and drug overdoses according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Fentanyl is definitely on the rise as one of the most abused opioids. This drug's incredible power, made from the same chemical structure as the poppy plant, is one of the main reasons it becomes so addictive. It is over 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin. It is considered highly addictive, and the withdrawal symptoms can be extreme. When used illegally, it is made in the form of powder or put into eye drops or nasal sprays, and very commonly made to look like prescriptions. This extremely powerful drug only takes 2 milligrams to stop a person from breathing. No wonder it is the leading cause of death in Americans under 44 years of age, according to the ACCADA. There are overestimated 150 deaths per day due to opioids and their side effects, with fentanyl leading that cause in the United States. The rise of fentanyl deaths began in 2011, and forensic laboratories across the United States reported that both illegally and legally produced fentanyl found in overdose cases rose from around 5,400 people to 56,000 people in just 3 years. When taken, fentanyl as a pharmaceutical, it is created to cause gentle euphoria and relief from pain.
There have been many problems that have been occurring since the rise of fentanyl outside hospital use. For example, in 2021, there were over 68,000 people who died from a drug overdose involving synthetic opioids, and between 2013 and 2021, there have been over 250,000. These drugs often cause confusion, drowsiness, nausea, urinary retention, pupillary constriction, and respiratory depression. An overdose can cause stupor, clammy skin, cyanosis, and a coma, which often leads to death. There are medical patients who are prescribed fentanyl by their doctor, but there is a serious risk of addiction and the complications from the withdrawal of the drug. Thus, a heavy and expensive lawsuit was brought against Janssen Pharmaceuticals. It turned out that Janssen Pharmaceuticals, a division of Johnson & Johnson, made false claims about the addictive nature of the prescription opioids. While some advocate for harm reduction and addiction treatment, others blame pharmaceutical companies like Janssen Pharmaceuticals for their role in promoting opioids. Some pharmaceutical companies have been accused of aggressive marketing tactics that downplay the risk of opioids and exaggerate their benefits, thus encouraging healthcare providers to prescribe opioids more liberally, contributing to the overuse and addiction. One of the problems with fentanyl on the streets is people often don't know they are having an overdose because of this particular opioid is mixed in with other drugs such as cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and pills, coupled with the fact that it is difficult to treat without proper equipment, has caused a nationwide problem. Now, to touch on public opinion of fentanyl, as well as the opioid crisis in general, is Amelia.
Public opinion on fentanyl. The mental health implications of opioids such as fentanyl have many short-term effects such as addiction, withdrawal, and various mental health disorders and personal feelings such as isolation. These feelings that cope with cravings and withdrawal symptoms associated with fentanyl can lead individuals to prioritize getting drugs over necessary personal expenses, according to the Cleveland Clinic. Alongside that, media's portrayal of fentanyl, including sensationalized stories of overdose, help shape people's public perception. Both in music and movies influence people with songs like Coding Crazy or Purple Rain, and TV shows and movies showing people doing various drugs at parties and helping fentanyl to continue to be popular. When it comes to the opioid addiction crisis, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration reports that stigma can hide those with opioid use disorder from seeking help. Public sentiment varies widely, from compassion and support to blame and condemnation. Opioid addiction is sometimes viewed as a moral failing or result of poor choices. People who suffer from this addiction could experience emotions of shame and guilt due to unwarranted judgment and blame placed on them for their illness. The stigma attached to these suffering individuals, that is, that they are junkies or addicts, makes asking for assistance more challenging. It is difficult for everyone to understand public opinion on opioids because of the complexity and diversity of the topic, which includes medical needs, criminal justice, healthcare regulations, and stigmatization.
While the outlook of the opioid crisis is looking grim, there are solutions being offered, such as what Robbie will now be talking about.
Hey everybody, my name's Robbie Treto, and I have been tasked with discussing solutions that are being offered. So to start off, the CDC has developed fentanyl testing strips, an inexpensive resource to help mitigate the fentanyl-caused deaths. There's a lot of funding towards an injection that can greatly increase the rate of survival of an overdose victim called naloxone. There has been put into place various locations that are safe and monitored places where people can slowly withdraw from this potent drug. On a national scale, the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, INL for short, has led efforts to reduce the supply of fentanyl and synthetic drugs coming to the U.S. from the overseas. The U.S. Department of State has been, starting in 2019, adopting a 5-year plan to shatter illicit drugs in their international supply chains. The strategy is focused on increasing the cost, risk, as well as difficulty of manufacturing and trafficking these drugs, and on reducing the global demand of the fentanyl market in the U.S. The INL is working hand in hand with the United States Office of Drugs and Crime in efforts to strengthen the technical, investigative, and forensic capacities of law enforcement agencies around the world to be able to detect and control synthetic drugs and new substances. According to the White House, the Biden administration announced a $450 million effort to fight these overdoses. This would essentially include distribution of naloxone, trained paramedics on treating overdoses, as well as increasing spending on an anti-fentanyl ad campaign and expand regional drug trafficking programs. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom claims that he has invested over $1 billion to decrease the opioid epidemic, as well as its trafficking. Considering the lives of this country's youth are at stake, the efforts that schools are making in preparing students and young adults for an overdose is substantial and effective. Raising the awareness of the overdose on fentanyl to the younger generation is essential in combating the issue and ultimately saving lives.
Finally, we have an interview with someone who has personal experience on the topic. This interview was conducted by Nate, and the interviewee is a law enforcement agent, Officer Brown.
Today I'm joined by Officer Brown, a California police officer. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into law enforcement?
So a little bit about myself. I've grown up in Monterey, California, basically my whole life. I'm 22 years old, almost 23. I got into law enforcement because I played sports pretty much my whole life, and a few of my coaches and a few of my teammates' parents, they were in law enforcement. When I went to college, my roommate, he studied criminal justice and kind of persuaded me to take some criminal justice classes. As I was taking some of those classes, a few of my professors, they thought I would be a good candidate to become a police officer or work in the first responder field. And that kind of pushed me a little bit harder to study more first responder classes or criminal justice classes. And as I was studying them, it made me realize that that is something I want to do long term. My background in law enforcement is I graduated from a 6-month California post-certified basic police academy, which was about 888 hours in length. The academy is broken down into about 42 different learning domains, such as controlled substances, first aid response, which entails CPR and AED usage, laws of arrest, and drug recognition. Since the academy, I have been on field training for the last 5 months.
How has being a police officer changed your perspective or opened your eyes to opioid usage?
So, since I became a police officer, I've realized that opioid usage is way more common than people expect. Most people expect that it cannot be their mothers, fathers, cousins, uncles, aunts that are abusing opioids, but that's not always the case. I have dealt with plenty of people that I did not realize were abusing opioids until they told me they were.
What is your opinion of the current state of the opioid crisis, particularly concerning fentanyl?
So the opioid crisis at the moment is becoming a bigger concern than it was about 5-10 years ago, especially pertaining to fentanyl usage. A few years ago, fentanyl wasn't a opioid that you would commonly see a user abusing or even being in possession of, but it's becoming more into the mainstream. A lot of people are using it more often because it's easier to conceal. It's sometimes cheaper to get. There's not really a smell to it, so you don't have to worry about exposing yourself to the people around you. The effects of it are a lot stronger, like I said, so a lot of people want that highest of the high.
What do you believe are the most common reasons for an individual to misuse or abuse opioids?
I think some of the most common reasons people misuse or abuse opioids are based on the way it makes them feel. Some people, they'll get it prescribed by a doctor and then they'll start feeling better after some time for whatever injury they had. And as they're taking these opioids and starting to feel better and better, they'll start getting attached to that new normal of what the opioid is making their body feel. So when their body is no longer on the opioid, their old normal starts to feel bad, so they want to keep on taking those opioids. So then they start referring to the streets to try to obtain some, because then their doctors or healthcare will stop prescribing them.
So, and when the healthcare does stop prescribing them, you say they go to the streets, and that's where they can get fentanyl-laced opioids, correct?
Yes.
So for the people that don't know, can you discuss the major impacts of the opioids?
Yeah, so opioids are a class of drugs that can reduce pain and produce a sense of euphoria, but they also have many negative impacts on health and society. Some of the major impacts of opioids are opioid overdose, opioids can slow down breathing and heart rate, which can lead to a coma or worse, even death. In 2021, approximately 81,000 people died from opioid overdose in the United States. There's opioid addiction. Opioids can cause physical and psychological dependence, which means that people need to take more of the drug to get the same effect or to avoid withdrawal symptoms. Opioid addiction can impair a person's ability to function normally and can lead to social and legal problems. There are opioid side effects. Opioids can cause various side effects such as nausea, vomiting, constipation, itching, drowsiness, confusion, depression, low sex hormones, and tooth decay. Some of the side effects can worsen the quality of life and increase the risk of other health issues.
How can opioids affect our community and the healthcare system?
So, opioid impact on the healthcare system, it can increase the demand for healthcare services such as emergency room visits, hospitalizations, treatments for addiction and overdose, and chronic pain management. Opioids can also increase the cost of healthcare and reduce the availability of resources for other patients. Opioid impact on the community, it can affect social and economic well-being of communities, such as increasing crime, violence, unemployment rate, homelessness, child abuse, and infectious diseases. Opioids can also erode the social fabric and trust among community members.
So how does law enforcement approach the issue of fentanyl and opioids in terms of controlling its distribution?
So controlling distribution is a very hard thing to do. So most agencies in California, they have programs where they could have users get help. Most of the time it's for free, or they'll give them words of encouragement to go to AA meetings or rely on their friends and family to rely less on opioids and help them return to their normal state of being.
Well, yeah, if you can't help yourself, then...
Yeah, most of the time, users, they won't accept help until they want help themselves. And pushing them to get help normally shies them away further from actually receiving or attempting to get help.
Yeah, there's like a stigma of being a drug user too, that like they don't want to be like labeled as a tweaker or someone who is going to these meetings.
Yeah, and most of the time they're ashamed of going to those meetings, so they don't want to put themselves in that vulnerable state. So that's also one of the factors that contributes to them not going to the meetings.
And it just only gets worse from there, for sure.
Yes. So fentanyl is a transdermal drug, means if it gets on your skin, it means it goes through your skin. So just holding it, you could get high. It's because it bleeds through your skin, because it's like microfibers and stuff like that. So what a lot of people in like big cities where fentanyl hasn't hit yet, a major drug dealer will go down, lace like a stereo with fentanyl, because he knows a homeless person will walk by and pick up that stereo. They'll pick it up. It's transdermal, so it goes through their skin. They get high. They don't know why they're high. But then they start craving that super high, so they start asking around, like, hey, I need something strong. And then some guy's like, oh, I just got this new shit. It's hella strong. They try out the fentanyl, not knowing it's fentanyl, or they might know it is.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh man, now I really want that. Now they're a recurring customer and they're hooked.
Yeah,
all because they accidentally got high picking up a random object.
Do you know where it's coming from and how is it getting here?
So from my training and experience, fentanyl is a opioid that started coming from the East Coast of the United States and is kind of trickling its way towards the West Coast. A lot of the ways people are getting it here is they're driving trucks from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast because it's harder to be detected if you're on a truck than it is if you're on the airplane, because if you go through an airport, most of the time they have really great security, such as like drug dogs or random TSA checks where they can go through luggage. Another way people are bringing it over here is they will go through the train system, because most trains in the United States don't have security or baggage check. So that is a very common way. Another way is people will find basically the list of ingredients to make the fentanyl, and they'll make it in their garage, or they'll set up like studios and warehouses where they can make labs and produce the fentanyl locally.
And that can be pretty dangerous, right?
That could be very dangerous because it could cause unwanted fires, or worse, the lab could burst and the chemicals could go everywhere, causing accidental exposure.
So it's so needed right now that people are just basically doing anything they can to get it to their area, right? I mean, they're going out onto trains and doing, the least amount of security possible to get it.
Yeah. So they're trying to be undetected, because if they become detected, they lose a lot of money. So as long as they stay undetected, they can make more money. So it's all about their financial gain, even if it costs someone else's expense.
Yeah, or someone else's life. Have you seen or followed any national news on this topic?
So I'm not the most up-to-date on national news for opioid usage and fentanyl usage, but I recently came across an article about how CHP officers found over 700,000 fentanyl-laced pills, 133 pounds of meth, and I think it was like 37 pounds of cocaine, which was taken from a vehicle after a traffic stop. I think the approximate value was $10.5 million, but that was the last major article I've read about that covered opioid usage in the United States.
Have you seen, like, how some dealers are making the pills, like, different shapes and different colors to, like, get that different attraction?
Yeah, so a lot of drug dealers, they want to make their drug catchy or appealing to people, so they try to make their drugs like eye candy. So they'll put in like Superman shapes, designers shapes. They'll make it like little Gucci pills, rainbow pills, because they know it's cool and trendy. So it might catch like the eye of the younger generation, and that will make them a longer recurring customer. Whereas someone that's 50 years old wouldn't be as long of a recurring customer.
Yeah. What, if anything, has been working to help fix the problem of opioids and fentanyl?
So one thing that's been working from what I've seen is just keep on continuously putting out resources for users. Like I said previously, a lot of people won't accept help until they themselves want help. But if you keep reassuring them that you want to help them, or even just putting out some options for them in the future, they'll remember that. And then if you come across them again and mention it again, they'll start thinking about it more often. And then you never know, one day they might wake up and think, you know what, today's the day that I want to accept help. And they'll remember those options you gave them, and they'll try to act upon them and try to get help from like either their community, friends, family, local agencies, even the hospital. A lot of hospitals, they have programs that are free, which could help opioid addictions.
What do you think as a society we can do about this problem?
So I think as a society, there could be more ads on the news, on the TVs, that are educating people on the matter. There could be more classes taught in schools, especially in like elementary schools or like middle schools. They can put posters up in the hallway that are educating people, so as they get older, they can remember what they learned as a kid, and that would kind of train their morals as a person to not enter into the use of drug field. The community could just be overall more supportive to people who are facing addictions, who are struggling with it. If the community is willing to help out these people who are trapped in this addiction, maybe the people who are addicted might be able to get out of their dark spot.
And with that, we conclude our podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and a special thanks to Officer Brown as well as our professor, Kristen LaFollette. Thank you.